What's going on, y'all? Wanted to give a brief overview of the E30 in its current state. I figured it might be good to document for those that are interested or in turboing their M10. So, quick overview of the car. The car is a 1984 318i. It's Safari beige. It's been in my possession maybe about 15 years now, with occasional stints away from me. You see the original badge and everything. It does have some dings around the car, but mostly it's stock, body and still factory fenders and everything. It's nothing too crazy. The car now has a cage in it and the original motor, but a different transmission and a few goodies around the car like limited slip and disc brakes that have been converted. So, at risk of forgetting a few things, let me start from the front and go to the back of the car. You'll forgive me that this is probably going to be a little out of order, but at least you'll get a view of all of the pieces of the car. So, at the front, we have a eBay Turbo intercooler. It was shipped damaged. I'm sure you can see that, maybe not. But the rest is all universal intercooler piping. I have more in the corner just in case, right there. But it's pretty simple components that have just been silicone coupled together. The valence doesn't fit anymore because of the way the early valence sits. It just simply wouldn't clear the intercooler. And it's honestly just supported with some angle iron. You'll probably not be able to see it, but just between the radiator there and where the bumper would sit, there's some angle iron that the intercooler attaches to. I removed the little holder to keep the hood propped open because, frankly, I don't really care that much, and I would prefer to just have it open all the way. It rests on the grill, whatever. So the radiator itself is stock, whatever it came with. I've flushed it a couple times, but I still think it's not perfect. However, the temperature stayed down. Little eBay, puller fan that I wired into the circuit for the regular AC fan. If I were to do it again, the factory AC fan actually blew a lot stronger, but it was extremely loud, like extremely loud on high speed. So the fan is currently controlled through Megasquirt, and I'll talk more about that when I get to it. Turbo is a very simple oil-cooled turbo. There's no even water cooling jacket. It's basically whatever was cheap on CX Racing. I think it has an internal wastegate, T3 flange with a V-band output. I think if you see there's closely, there's a little adapter to the V-band, but that came with the turbo. I think the turbo was pretty cheap, so I haven't been afraid to just absolutely destroy it with anti-lag. The motor, it's a little bit of a mess right now. And I feel like in every race car, it's always a little bit temporary. But the motor itself is pretty much stock. It has ARP head studs and a replacement head gasket. I pulled off the head just to make sure that it was okay, refresh it a little bit, and put it back on the car with fresh head studs. So that's pretty much all that's done to the motor itself. I have a oil pan baffle that I custom made. Basically, it just sits between the upper pan and lower pan. You'll probably see this small aluminum piece right here on the edge of the aluminum casting. So it has a O2 again trigger wheel. I guess you can't see that. Let me get a light. Has an O2 again trigger wheel. The trigger wheel is not in production anymore, but you can see it has a trigger wheel and a ETS style VR sensor. Regular water pump. This is also underdriven, this pulley, so everything else is driven a little lower. I replaced the little bracket that is OE with basically just some eyelets and all thread. The factory one, I think last time I tried to buy it, after tearing probably 3 of them up with the adjustable mechanism, I think it was like $90. And knowing that they're so soft and so easy to break, I just said, fuck that. I can do something better with McMaster car. It's not perfect, but it works. You see it's a little bit offset. It's not perfectly straight. So the eyelets work in that manner. I've rewired the electrical system. This is the latest project that I did with, you see this beefier cable and a separate cable for the starter. It goes to the electrical cutoff switch that I haven't pulled the manual cutoff, the actual like pull mechanism. Intake manifold is stock. Have the same throttle body as left the factory, but again, there's an O2 again plate adapter that actually will allow a VG30 Nissan TPS sensor, which allows for throttle position. The factory switch is just on off. You'll see down there have some green urethane mounts from RevShift. There's also those on the transmission. Other than that, I think like the mechanical components of the engine are pretty much stock. Yeah. Trying to think if there's anything else. I don't think so. Let's see. On fuel and ignition, let me also show you the exhaust manifold before I forget. The exhaust manifold is another cheap eBay part, and it's not great for plug number 1, as you can see. I've tried to manage them and get them out of the way, but haven't burned one up yet, which is good. This is the manifold that maybe you can see down here. It's there's another design. I actually have this the opposite design here on the floor over here, but I haven't run it myself, where the manifold actually goes all the way forward past the cylinder number 1. And this one is designed a little bit different. So you can see how far forward that would have been if it was truly, you see the flange is probably about right here in line with number 1. The turbo would have been probably up here if that was the case. So pretty simple setup. The drain for the turbo goes to the timing cover. I don't know if you can see that. Let me try to get you in there so you can see. Drain goes to the timing cover. I guess you can see the AN fitting, but that's probably it. Yeah, there you go. And has a distributor delete, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Oil feed for the turbo comes off of the factory head switch for the oil pressure sensor, and then there's also an oil pressure sensor that I have tapped over there, as well as an oil temperature sensor. The electronics for the engine are controlled by a Megasquirt 3. You probably don't need Megasquirt 3, you can do something else. I just have a simple setup here. I also have this basically drive other components of the car, like cluster and that sort of thing. So I have all the relays there for that. It's not the prettiest setup, probably things I would redo. Like anything else, you do it once, you see all the flaws, and would have tweaks for next time. Let's see. So Megasquirt is driving a ETIS coil, but it's directly controlled by the Megasquirt. So we can do launch control and flat shift, all these sorts of things that wouldn't be possible with a regular ETIS setup. I have an adjustable fuel pressure regulator, but I really don't use it. The reason why is I was having low confidence that the factory fuel pressure regulator was actually rising rates at the the 1-to-1 ratio if it was causing a problem, and it was factory. So I basically took it off and bought this cheap little thing on eBay. Better, probably not, but at least there's a gauge on it. What actually was happening was there was not enough fuel getting to the injectors from the fuel pump, which I can talk about a little bit later. The injectors here are actually 80-pound Snake Eater performance injectors, which are kind of popular with the LS guys. It's pretty nice when you only have to buy 4 injectors rather than a whole 8 or even 6. And for a while I got by with 30-pound injectors from a Volvo, a turbo Volvo. In a previous life I had a lot of Volvo stuff. This is the ethanol content sensor, and you'll also see the fuel filter, the 10 micron filter, as well as like the factory placement fuel filter down there. What else? Got regular boost control with a MAC valve, and that just goes from the compressor housing to the top side of the wastegate. Interesting, on these cheap little turbos, they have a bottom and top side of the internal wastegate, so kind of funny. This block-off plate, you'll probably hear it, I think for the last time here, is O2 again. And don't mind the copper shavings, that was from me drilling some of these cables. So, what else? I think that's pretty much it for the engine bay. I have a cheap little crankcase vent, but honestly, I hate it. I would probably redo that next and just vent it to atmosphere or something similar. Also have fuel pressure here that goes to the rail, and then coolant pressure that is tapped essentially where the OE, I can't remember, the gauge cluster temperature sensor was. So that's that. I also have provisions for a cam sensor. That's that wire there that kind of goes behind here and it's not connected to anything. Eventually I'll do a cam sensor for independent spark control instead of wasted spark, or fully sequential as they call it. Exhaust was custom made. It's just a friend of mine did it for, you know, $100 or whatever, so it's not great. It actually kind of hangs down pretty low under the car, but you know, that's life. I don't really care that much. It's functional, and I don't really care if it's scraped up too much. So the steering rack is stock. Behind the engine is a Getrag 260 from a M30 car. So basically a 5 Series. It's actually an E34 535i is where that transmission came from. And the reason for that is, like, at 200 horsepower, the motor just destroyed second gear. Some grinding happened, and the roller bearings just seem to come out with a fluid flush. So onto the interior of the car, pretty simple setup. Basically everything's gutted. No radio, no power steering, no air conditioning. Yeah, no carpet or anything in here, obviously. So it's full race car. It still has windows because I wanted to keep those. You'll see we just got the X bars really close to the door and haven't skinned them. And I 3D printed these adapters for the crank windows. So let me demo those for you. And those actually clear the roll cage, so you can use them without having to open the door, which is nice. The factory ones were too long. So the rest of the car is just like a simple, you know, eBay steering adapter. I bought this like back in, I don't know how long, 15 years ago now is what I think it is. And that was just with an NRG quick release that's on it. It puts the wheel a little close to the driver, but honestly, I don't mind. And here's the wheel that I have in the seat. The door pulls that you see are just, you know, cheap things that I found on Etsy. Little phone mount holder just in case, you know, you're driving to the track and you don't want to keep your phone like in your lap. And yeah. I have an EGT sensor, that's that gauge that's on the right side of the column, and AFR gauge that's on the left side. The rest of them I don't really worry about. I assume that Megascore's okay. Yeah, if it overheats, the only thing that I have really to prevent that is a RPM limit. So, you'll forgive me, this video is already getting quite long, but I figure those who are interested will watch it, and those that don't, hey, whatever. No sweat off my back. I figure I love to share if I can, and hope that you get something out of it. The cage itself is from Track Spec Motorsports in the US. That's in California, I think, Southern California. These guys actually laser scan a an E30 chassis, and then they CNC cut basically something that they've modeled in CAD. And the cage fitment is really nice. I mean, I'm not an expert with cages, but it fits pretty well. And this is probably even, it doesn't have to even get this far away. We actually cut a little bit off of the main hoop, I think, to make it fit. There were some complications with the early model car for where the main hoop lands, but honestly, it wasn't that big of a deal. I had to cut like a half inch off the main hoop, but it still sits everywhere, you know, exactly where it needs to. So you can see the fitment there. Had to do the sunroof delete because it wouldn't fit with the cage. And I actually just measured out this piece and just modeled it in CAD and then sent it to a place like Cut Send to have it cut up. So pretty simple, super thin. I think it weighs like 2 pounds. So that's all it really needs. And I just, you know, sealed it up with some some regular clear caulking, which, hey, whatever. I don't really care. It's a race car, right? And it works. In the back of the car, there is a Walbro 255 in tank. I actually eliminated the second transfer pump, and that's basically all it's done. There's a small step down on the other side of the car, and that's kind of the extent of it. In the back of the car, it's been converted to disc brakes, so no more drums on this car. It's just a 325i, you know, rear end for the trailing arms, and I actually have a 373 limited slip differential. So I think that's about it for the car. I don't know if I'm forgetting anything, but yeah, it's a fairly simple setup. There's nothing too special about it. The car is running E85 most of the time. It is running 17 pounds of boost with boost by gear and made about 220 wheel horsepower on the dyno. So it's fun. The car weighs 2366 with fuel, no driver. And yeah, it's kind of a blast. The tires themselves are a 225/45/16 on what may or may not be Borbet Type C knockoffs. If you have any more questions, just let me know. Happy to answer them. I think that this probably gives you a good overview of the car and hopefully gets you started if you're interested in turboing your M10. They're kind of few and far between now. They used to be so cheap and you could pick them up for 50 bucks, if not have somebody pay you to take them away. But now they're kind of rare. I don't know if I would use it as a base for a platform today, but you know, if you have one laying around and you're interested in turboing it, I mean, they seem pretty robust. It seems that the wrist pins on the cylinders, or excuse me, on the pistons are a little weak once you start getting into higher horsepower levels. But it's not something that I've experienced yet. I don't know how many miles are on this motor, and frankly, it's probably a little tired, but it's fun for now. I have another one in the corner, but I'm not worried about building it yet. So if you have any additional questions, let me know. I hope that you enjoyed the walk around and brief overview of the car. Thanks.